Today I'm going to be talking about the fantasy books that I want to try to read by the end of the year. If I don't get around to them, then that is absolutely fine. I'm not going to punish myself or anything, but these are books that I have had on my TBR or on my wish list for the longest time. I really should be getting to them. The only thing is, I keep getting into fantasy reading slumps. Over the past few years, I have definitely been prioritising other genres, mainly thrillers and contemporary books. Contemporary and thriller are my most read genres of this year so far. But I have so many fantasy books because I keep buying them, and especially back in my early days of booktubing and book blogging, fantasy was all the rage in YA, and that's mainly what I was reading. And then I slowly transitioned into fantasy books. I ended up buying a ton of adult fantasy. First books in a series, because there are so many adult fantasy series, but I didn't read any of them. So I have so many fantasy books here. Not all of these that I'm going to show you today are actually part of a series, because I didn't want to just get out a bunch of series to start by the end of the year, because I feel like that's not really achievable for me. I am avoiding fantasy series at the moment, but I do have some here that I want to at least try to get to. Some of these are older books, some of them are a little bit newer, and I would like to get through at least some of them. So I have a whole selection here. If I get through 75% of them, then go me. I will be so happy if January comes around and I will have read most of this list. And that also means I will have read some backlist books from my TBR. So the first one I want to show you or talk about is The Night Circus. So this is hyped up all over BookTok at the moment, apparently. I'm not really on BookTok that much, but I keep seeing stuff on Twitter. People have just rediscovered it and they're loving it. I saw a tweet the other day saying, I don't understand why The Night Circus is so underhyped because it's such a good book. I've had it for years. I've had it since it came out in paperback. I think I got this secondhand from Amazon, but when did it even come out? It came out when I was first booktubing, 2012. I would have bought this in probably 2013 and I still haven't read it, which is atrocious. I have no idea what this is about. I know that Erin Morgenstern is known for their lyrical descriptive writing style. Apparently their writing is quite beautiful, which I don't tend to go for. The only reason I bought this was because of the hype years ago, and it's sat on my shelf ever since. So it says here that the circus arrives without warning, no announcements precede it. It is simply there when yesterday it was not. That doesn't tell me anything, don't know what this is about, but I need to hurry up and read it because it's been on my shelf for years. This next book you have seen 100 times on my channel because I keep putting it off, and that is Words of Radiance Part 2. I'm reading this month. I don't care if I have to stay up all night to finish it on the 30th of September, but I am finishing this book, or at least this half. I've already read Part 1, thankfully, but I've been stuck on Part 2 for ages. I started rereading this as a buddy read at the beginning of the year, and I didn't finish it, but I did start reading Part 2 probably about 4 years ago. And I still haven't finished it. I don't know what it is, but I just get into this slump around the same time every single time I try to read it. So I'm on chapter 56. If any of you are Stormlight fans and know what happens there, then you'll know where I'm at, but I really don't know why I keep stopping around the same time or around the same point every time. I think I just need to push through, read another 100 pages, and then by the time I get to this point, I'm going to be in love with it again. So this was on my 5-star predictions list for this year. It's on my September TBR. I need to finish it. It's the highest rated book on my TBR, even though it's part 2. It's 4.81 on Goodreads, and I need to finish it and then maybe get to Oathbringer, but definitely not this year. Next is another book that's been out for ages and I should have read it already. So that is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in, I think it's just the Renegades series. I don't really know what it's called, but this is about superheroes, and that is a subgenre that I actually really enjoy. It's just not something that I read about very often because I went through a kind of burnout phase with it. But I've had this book for years. I think it came out in 2014, 2015, maybe not quite that early, but I've had it for quite a while. I really enjoyed reading the Lunar Chronicles by this author as well, so I don't know why I haven't picked it up yet. I think it's the size of it. Even though it's YA, it's quite chunky, and the margins on the pages quite small. You can see here that the text goes all the way up to the top and all the way up to this margin, which I really don't like. Publishers don't do this, I hate it. Oh, it says here it came out in 2017, so I was a little off with the dates. But yes, I'm going to read this by the end of the year, also help me God. Next, I wanted to mention an absolute classic, and that is The Light Fantastic. So I've read The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I thought it was okay, and I know that that's a common reaction to the first 5-6 books in this series. They're just all right, but then as you carry on, they get better and better. I want to read this series in publication order. I know that's not the recommended reading order. Terry Pratchett himself, I think, has recommended that you start from a different point, but I don't want to. I want to read in the order that they were published so that the series keeps getting better and better. And this is actually one of my partner's favourite series. He loves Terry Pratchett. So I'm going to read this by the end of the year. It's a very short book. It's under 300 pages, but obviously it's mass market paperback, so it's tiny. And I'm actually just admiring the illustrations on this cover that I've never really noticed before, but they really are quite cool. So I don't really know what this one's about, but I think it follows Rincewind again, like the first one did, who's not my favourite character, but he's alright. Looking forward to getting through this and then carrying on with the series. Next is an entire series that I'm hoping to read, but not all by the end of this year. If I just get through the first one, then I'll be super happy. So that is the Ember in the Ashes series. I've only got books 1 to 3 here. I don't own book 4 in paperback yet. I don't even know if it's out in paperback, and I want my series to match, so I'm not going to go and buy the hardback, obviously. So I've actually already read an Ember in the Ashes, so this should be a really quick reread for me. I really wanted to do a vlog at the end of last year where I read all of this series in time for the 4th book to come out, and then I could give you my full kind of thoughts on the entire series. This is one that I started when it first came out in 2014. Sabaa Tahir was one of the authors that I promoted as a debut author, and I loved it. I remember giving this 4 stars, I think. I'm not sure if I would feel the same way now. I would probably give it a 3, but I'm going to reread it just in case. I might end up enjoying it more than I think I will. I can't remember much about this one either, so I'm going into it quite fresh, I think. And then if I do love it, then I'm going to read the next 2 books in the series and then the 4th at some point. But I'm not going to get to these 2 by 2022 just because that's a lot of dedication. I don't know if I can do that, but if I do, then that's a massive bonus. Maybe I will marathon this series. I'm not holding myself to that. I at least want to read the first book. The next book I wanted to mention is one that has been on several TBRs this year and last year. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, and that is The Obelisk Gate. So this is the sequel to the 5th season, which I adored. I've heard that this one isn't as good as the first book, and I love the first book, so I don't really want to kind of ruin my memories of the first one by reading a book that's not quite as good, if that makes any sense at all. I know that I'm going to really enjoy this trilogy. I'm going to really enjoy reading the 3rd book as well. I think they're going to work really well together. It's just, I love the 5th season so much, and now that all of the twists in the first book have happened, I'm wondering if there's going to be any kind of intrigue left in the rest of the trilogy. Let me know in the comments below if you've enjoyed The Obelisk Gate as much as the 5th season, because I know that the first book left such an impression on me and on a bunch of other readers as well. Certain things happened and people loved it. So I'm wondering if the other books in this series are the same, or at least the 2nd book. I imagine the 3rd book is mostly just wrapping things up, but I could be wrong. But I do want to get to this by the end of the year because it's been on so many of my TBRs, and I really think it's time that I finally read it. Next we have an urban fantasy, and that is Ill Winds by Rachel Caine. I've been meaning to read this one for ages as well because Rachel Caine is one of my favourite authors. She writes some really good thrillers, for one thing, and I've enjoyed some of her paranormal books, urban fantasy books in the past. This one is about weather wardens and djinn, so that sounds like something that I would really enjoy. I really like stories about people with kind of elemental magic. It's one of my favourite kinds of magic, so I'm looking forward to reading this one soon. Then I also want to read Storm Chaser, which is the 2nd book in the Edge Chronicles if you're reading them in publication order like I am. I actually tried to read this one when I was a child. It was released just after Beyond the Deep Woods, which is one of my all-time favourite middle grade books or children's books. I don't really know what you'd class this as, but I loved that as a child. I tried to read this one, but it wasn't as good, I think because it wasn't set in the Deep Woods, and that's a setting, a fantastical setting that I really, really enjoyed. So it was really sad to me to leave that behind, but I think I'm ready now to carry on with this series and reread them or read them, as the case may be. I can't remember how far through this series I got when I was younger, but I do remember loving the illustrations. They were so much fun to read, and I'm looking forward to blasting through this one. Finally, the last fantasy book on my TBR that I'm hoping to read by the end of the year, which I think might also be a little bit sci-fi, but I'm fairly sure it's mostly fantasy. That is Gideon the Ninth. This was actually given to me by my friend Rowan. I'm really grateful, but I haven't read it yet, and I need to hurry the F up because soon the 3rd book's going to be coming out. I don't know exactly when, but I'm sure it's coming out soon. And Harrow the Ninth 2nd book is already out, and I really should have read this already. I don't know anything about it. When it was being marketed a couple of years ago, it was being sold as lesbian necromancers in space, but since then that has been debunked by the entire community, and apparently it's not about that at all. So I've got no idea what this is about. The tagline here just says the Emperor needs necromancers. The 9th necromancer needs a swordswoman. Gideon has a sword, some dirty magazines, and no more time for undead nonsense. So I don't know what this is about. I don't know if it's fantasy, I don't know if it's sci-fi, but I'm including it here anyway because I'm fairly sure it's got some fantastical elements. And it's also a floppy paperback, which I love. I'm certain I'm going to enjoy this one. I've heard it's not for everyone, but I love the sound of it. I love the cover as well. And I think that's half of the reason why I really want to read this. So those are some of the fantasy books that I'm hoping to read by the end of this year. Let me know which ones you think I should prioritise. I doubt I'm going to get to all of these, but I'm really hoping that I can at least get to most of them. Like I said, I'm going to aim for 75% of them. If I don't get to 75%, I'm not going to punish myself. I'm not setting this as an official challenge, but it would be really good to finally read some of these fantasy books that have been on my TBR for absolute years. Some of them almost a decade, which is insane. Let me know your thoughts on these books in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you all in my next video. Bye!